This episode of Harvey Brownstone Interviews is brought to you by the Harvey Brownstone Talk Show Blend Coffee, available at hollywoodblends.com. Everyone's saying it's the best coffee they've ever tasted. Why not give it a try and see for yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's guest is a highly acclaimed and beloved actor and writer who's been immortalized for his portrayal of several iconic TV characters. He played the charismatic and intense werewolf, Quentin Collins, on the classic daytime drama Dark Shadows, and of course in the feature film Night of Dark Shadows. He was also the ruthless businessman Richard Channing on Falcon Crest, and before that, he was the cunning and debonair Michael Tyrone on Flamingo Road. But beyond those signature roles, our guest has had a long and diverse career. He was in 4 Broadway productions and co-starred in the national tour of The Impossible Years. On the big screen, he appeared in some great movies like Up the Sandbox, Raise the Titanic, Rich and Famous, Dying Young, Intersection, The Girl in Blue, The Super Cops, Inhale, The Great Nick D, and many more. He's also guest starred in dozens of classic TV shows, including The Waltons, Policewoman, Kojak, Touched by an Angel, Ally McBeal, Mad Men, Castle Rock, NCIS New Orleans, and so many more. And he's appeared in a number of great TV movies and miniseries, including Washington Behind Closed Doors, Telethon, The Knight Rider, Dr. Franken, The Black Hole, and Deck the Halls, to name just a few. And beyond all of that, our guest is a prolific author, playwright, and poet. He's written 10 books: In and Out of the Shadows, which is a career retrospective, My Mother's Autumn and Happenstance, which are collections of poetry, The Blue Door and Lincoln's Better Angel, which are novels that were incorporated into plays, Promises of Love and A Casualty of Indifference, which are his latest novels, A Better Place, which is all about his love for his home state of West Virginia and how his sense of place shapes his view of the world, My Shadows Past, in which he reflects on his time on Dark Shadows, and Light and Shadows, a collection of poems inspired by Dark Shadows and its fans. Our guest also has a distinguished record of community service. He and his wife, Chip, ran a summer children's musical theater in New York for 10 years, and he's directed numerous youth programs. He's been inducted into the Cleveland Playhouse Hall of Fame, and he's a recipient of the Millennium Recognition Award from the Shakespeare Theater in Washington, D.C. He's an honorary member of the West Virginia University Creative Arts Center's Advisory Board, and he's worked with the Governor's Honor Academy. He's received distinguished alumni awards from both of his alma maters, West Virginia University and Southern Illinois University. In 1998, he was the first person to receive a Life Achievement Award from the West Virginia University College of Creative Arts. And in 2004, he received an honorary doctorate from West Virginia University. I'm delighted and honored to welcome the incomparable David Selby to our show. David, thank you so much for being here.
Well, no, it's my pleasure. It really is. Listening to all of that, it just brings back all of those days, those years.
Well, there's a lot to bring back. You were born and raised in Morgantown, West Virginia, and you've written a lot about the impact that West Virginia has had on your personality and on your philosophy of life. What do you think was the most special thing about growing up there?
The people, my grandparents on both sides. My mother's family were coal miners. They're, and this road they lived on, dirt road, it was a coal town road. On the other side, on my dad's side, they were farmers. The farm is still, there's portions of it still there, not mine, but the land is still there.
Now, when you were a kid, David, you loved going to the movies and you went to see Gone with the Wind by yourself. Is that when you got the acting bug?
Yes, I did go see Gone with the Wind, but I saw a lot of films, like that in my town, in Morgantown. There was a theater there where I went in the mornings. It's called the Morgan Theater, and you could go and you could watch cartoons. But there was the Metropolitan Theater and Warner Theater, and they all had Warner's had more of a, I guess, Hollywood kinds of films in those days, and so did the Metropolitan. But I grew up there watching those films that we all did.
You've got a bachelor's degree in 1963, a master's degree in 1964, and a PhD in 1970, which is far more formal education than most actors ever get. What motivated your academic pursuits to such an extent?
Well, first of all, the person I was married to, the lady I was married to, still married to, and had gone to a good school. She went to an all-women's school down in Virginia. But before that, I had a teacher, a couple of teachers. Charles Neal was one, and he encouraged me, and he helped me find theater. When I found theater, I can't tell you how important that was to me. And then, I just had a chance we decided to go out to Illinois, and we went to Southern Illinois University, and they were very good to me. So I've been fortunate along the way to do these things and to meet people who encouraged me. In fact, the first person I met after I got out of high school, his name was Charles Neal, and he was my advisor, turned out. But more importantly, he was in the theater department. He was a teacher, and he's the one. He said to me, I think you ought to, come on over to the theater department. I think you could do okay. So without taking another class, without thinking about anything else, I went over to the theater department.
And the rest is history. The rest is history. You were cast in the role of Quentin Collins in Dark Shadows after doing a scene from the Tennessee Williams play Summer and Smoke in Dan Curtis's office. Now, you didn't know a lot about the show or your character before being cast in it. And for the first few months, you didn't even speak. You were a ghost. What did you think of the job during those initial months?
I was delighted to have the job. There was a wonderful person back then. Her name was Marion Dougherty. She's the first person I met about theater. And she's the one, she said, come with me. We went out of her office. She called a cab, and the cab took us up to Dan Curtis's office, which was in New York. I think it was on Park Avenue somewhere. She paid for the cab fare. We went in and met Dan, and it was wonderful. He said, do a scene for me. Will you do a scene for me? So I invited my friend to come with me, to join me over there one day, and we did a scene, as you mentioned. But anyway, and then Dan invited me over to the theater, over to West 53rd Street. It's where the studio was for Dark Shadows. And he looked at me on camera and said, all right, I think you'll do.
Well, when you were filming Dark Shadows, it was done live to tape, as they say, without stopping, which is as close to live theater as you can get. That must have been nerve-wracking at times.
It was indeed. You had to, we got in there at 8 o'clock in the morning. We went in early to rehearse, block the scene out. It gave you a chance to get familiar with the lines, with what you were going to say. So that was very important. And by the end of the day, by like 3 o'clock or whatever, we were ready to film, the scene, to do the show. And that's how we did it. And
as you know, the show, and especially your character, Quentin, became immensely popular. So there you are, 1968, you're 27 years old, you've become an international sensation, And even more than that, David, you became a teen idol and a sex symbol. I mean, you were all over 16 magazine and Tiger Beat. How did you adjust to being so famous?
They were such wonderful people who had Tiger Beat, and what was her name? Gloria Stavers, one lady. And I don't know, they were terrific. Dan Curtis was responsible for Dark Shadows.
But what about you? How did you deal with that sudden fame? It was huge. You were everywhere.
Well, one of the things I probably wasn't aware, of how whatever, until, now this is true, until the first, I'd say, week. There was a parking lot beside the studio on 53rd Street. I went downstairs from the studio that first week, in fact, the first day or whatever, and there were all of these young people outside, downstairs in the hallway, in the lobby, saying hello, hello, and so the fellow who worked when I went outside, I didn't know what to do. And the fellow who worked at the parking lot there ushered me into his booth and said, here, stay in here for a minute. So I went there and I'd stay there. And then eventually, I got used to all of it. And a lot of the kids who were outside the studio and down in the lobby, they would walk me home, walk me to my apartment. Every day I finished, they would walk me to my apartment. A couple of them were quite serious. They asked my wife and I to adopt them. And that was it was quite special then. I can't think. Those children were so wonderful, Harvey. They were beautiful. They were wonderful. They were so kind and full of laughs, and full of joy about watching the show that Dan Curtis created.
Well, you know what's amazing about that is that many young male stars today who have become sex symbols find it very difficult, and they worry about their security, and they find it really messes with their mind. And you just took it all in stride.
Yes, but a lot of that, you see, had to do with the fans themselves, the people who came to see me. They were wonderful. And I grew up in theater, but I did theater in New York, whether it was off Broadway or in a bar, I'd do plays or whatever. But the fans were so terrific. They were full of, joy, laughter, they were wonderful. So I had their support in a way. And, that support followed me, through my early career, to different towns, different cities, different states, wherever I would go, wherever ABC would send me, out there.
Well, you still have that support. Now, when you were filming Dark Shadows, it was the late 60s. It was a very tumultuous time in America. There was the civil rights movement, the race riots, the hippie movement. Did you see any connection between the political reality in America and what was happening on your show?
Maybe, but not, Dan, they tried to keep the show, Dan and the writers, Sam Hall, Gordon, they kept that show pretty tight. It was quite wonderful that way.
Did you and your co-stars on the show and the directors and the writers, did you ever talk about identifying what it was about that unique world of gothic romance and sensuality and horror that made Dark Shadows resonate with so many millions of people?
Oh, sure. We talked about it. We we marveled at it. I don't know, say in awe of it, of all the fans. But wherever I went in those days, and when I didn't think about it at first, but after I had been doing it for, a few weeks or whatever, or touring different studios, different states, different places, it was quite special. I was one of the most fortunate people.
I just love that gratitude that you express, that you recognize how special that show was. And of all your co stars, besides the wonderful Jonathan Frid, I have to say that the legendary Joan Bennett and Thayer David really elevated the show to an instant classic. Was it intimidating for you, David, as a young actor just starting out in the television, to work with those legends?
Well, it was, except that I did theater. I grew up doing theater. I mean, as a kid. So they also were, had done theater. Still, they were doing theater. They were all theater actors. Grayson Hall, now her husband also was a writer. Joan Bennett, I can't tell you how wonderful Joan was. But Joan Bennett, everybody back in the back in those times, they were all terrific.
Oh, yeah. Well, for those of our viewers who are not familiar with Joan Bennett, she was in classic movies like Moby Dick, Little Women, The Man in the Iron Mask, Father of the Bride. And Thayer David was in Journey to the Center of the Earth, Little Big Man, Save the Tiger, Rocky, Fun with Dick and Jane. I mean, your show had a level of prestige that you just didn't see on daytime television back then, don't you think?
Oh, well, yes, my goodness. And how would you like to go, to go in and say, oh my goodness, I'm doing a scene with Joan Bennett today. But I was intimidated, not intimidated, because they wouldn't allow that. The actors. Joan was wonderful. I can't tell you how wonderful. Thayer David, all of them,
And Grayson Hall. I mean,
Grayson Hall, and they all became, and Grayson became dear friends.
well, she was so underrated in the industry, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, she was never underrated in my book. I never even thought about her being underrated.
Now,
Not
you're one of the very, very few actors I can think of whose character has his very own theme song, Shadows of the Night, which was a Grammy nominated top 10 single. And you actually recorded the spoken lyrics. What goes through your mind when you hear that song nowadays?
the same, I play it, we play it. I laugh, we smile. We're thankful.
The series was canceled rather abruptly on April 2nd, 1971, which I'm sure was a financial decision by the network, but it came as a great shock to the public. Were you shocked as well?
Yes, I was shocked. But I went and did a couple of films, and I was doing theater also. So it was busy. I mean, I was downtown working at a theater for a man named Joe Papp. It was called the Public Theater downtown. All the actors went there to work. That was quite special.
So you just kept going. Well, in 2012, you made a cameo appearance in the Tim Burton movie Dark Shadows, starring Johnny Depp. What was that experience like?
It was nice meeting Johnny.
Well, do you think that Dark Shadows could be successful today as a TV series or a movie?
You're asking me, and I would say a definite, I think so, yes.
I do too. I think it's its own world.
Yeah.
So what does it feel like, David, when fans come up to you and tell you how much Dark Shadows and specifically your performance as Quentin has meant to them? What does that feel like?
Harvey, I don't know how to say it. I've been so blessed from almost the very beginning of my time with Dark Shadows. I cannot tell you the places I've traveled, the people I've met, wherever. I could be just going to the theater on Broadway to see a show. And I sit down and someone pats me on the back and says, "Hi, David. It's nice to see you and nice to meet you." So that followed me, still to this day, where if I go and someone will, want to talk about Dark Shadows, everything. So I always remember Dan Curtis, and something wonderful was happening to us. I can't recall. But Dan said to me, he's driving me home. He had his car he parked down there, and he would drive up. And I lived up in the 70s on the west side. And he dropped me off more than once. One day he said to me, can you believe this? Can you believe what has happened? And he was as taken as the rest of us.
Well, that was only one of your successes. I mean, you were on seasons 2 to 9 of Falcon Crest, playing the charming but devious businessman Richard Channing. Did you enjoy working on that show as much as you did on Dark Shadows?
Oh, yeah, look at the people I worked with. Jane Wyman, all of the people that I got to work with. And I'm still to this day, I'll put in a call. Do you know she was on the show, Susan Sullivan?
Yes.
Susan and I are working together now, just doing things that she is writing, along with her most important. She is there writing shows for us to do. So we're still involved in, doing that.
Well, the Richard Channing character had a lot of very intense storylines. There were power struggles with his manipulative mother. He had complicated relationships, especially with Maggie and Lauren. He was involved with an organized crime syndicate. He had business ventures that created conflicts with family members. And of course, his life was often in danger. There was a car bombing, a phony kidnapping, and for a while we thought he was dead. Were you always happy with the storylines for your character?
I can't say I was always happy. I don't know. I don't recall. But generally, I was happy because I was working and I was playing a character that I enjoyed playing.
And look at the people. I mean, you mentioned Jane Wyman. You worked with Cesar Romero, E.G. Marshall, Lana Turner, Gina Lola Brigida, Kim Novak, Celeste Holm, Leslie Caron. I mean, you must have so many memories of working with those people.
Oh my God, they are all wonderful. And I have memories of them around me in my house because they were very special.
I mean, that was one of the fun things about watching Falcon Crest is that you were surrounded by these legends all the time. They were guest starring on your show.
Yes, yes.
I will never forget the very last episode of Falcon Crest, which was broadcast on May 17th, 1990. It was very emotional, especially when Jane Wyman delivered that famous monologue, which ended with her raising a glass and saying, "A toast to you, Falcon Crest, and long may you live." Were you there when that scene was filmed?
I don't recall, to be honest.
What a scene that was.
Yeah, I was there for a lot of the scenes, a lot of the people that I got to work with. And you mentioned them all. How fortunate, how blessed could you be?
Oh, it's magical. You've had a magical life. I don't know if you've read Barbra Streisand's memoir, but even though it's 966 pages, she writes almost nothing about Up the Sandbox. So we really have no idea how she felt about making the movie. What was your experience working with her?
Oh my God, she was wonderful. And I would imagine is wonderful. We had a good time on, doing the film, but we had a good time, period. I had a good time being with her, going to her house. She was always very kind. She's a special lady.
And you were one of her leading men. That's so exciting.
Well, I was, as I say, I was lucky.
Well, in 1988, you starred in a TV movie called King of the Olympics. You portrayed Avery Brundage, one of the most famous presidents of the International Olympic Committee. Now, he was already dead when you made the movie, so you didn't get to meet him. But how did you prepare for that role?
Well, I was invited by a man who lived in LA up in the hills. He came to me one day, I ran it, and he brought up the idea of doing this, film he wanted to do on Avery Brundage. And what got me was I said, "Oh my God, I'm going to Europe. I'm going over, I had been fortunate and again lucky I had been there, but this was to film over there in different places. So that was very special.
But when you have to play a real person, is there pressure on you to try to reflect who they really were and how they behaved?
Yeah, thinking back on it, I can't.
I mean, you
Yeah.
must have done some
Yeah.
research.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Well, and then in 1970, you played another real person, President Abraham Lincoln in Flatboat Man. And then in 1998, you got to play him again in an episode of Touched by an Angel called Beautiful Dreamer. What was
Well,
it like to play Abraham Lincoln twice?
when I went to Illinois to go to graduate school eventually, and there was a wonderful man. His name was Chris Moe, M-O-E. He was very special to me. He's the one that there was a theater, outdoor theater in Illinois, not too far from Springfield. And he said, "We have an outdoor theater, and we want to do a Lincoln play. And I would like you to play Lincoln." And so I went there. Chris directed it. It was special to me.
Well, you're one of a group of very prestigious actors who've played Abraham Lincoln. I mean, there was Henry Fonda, Raymond Massey, Gregory Peck. Were you influenced by those performances?
No. Now, to tell you the truth, I wasn't aware of their performances when I did Lincoln. Even when I, was invited to Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C. to do Lincoln there, which was quite special to me. And so I played Ford's Theater. In fact, a couple of times I went there to do it. And when I was in Illinois, I would go around doing some Lincoln here and there.
In
Yes.
1992, you co starred with the great Patty Duke in a terrific TV movie called Grave Secrets, The Legacy of Hilltop Drive. Do you remember what it was like working with Patty Duke?
Patty, oh my God. Patty was special. Again, wonderful.
I loved her.
We had a great time.
And you worked with some great directors like Ridley Scott, Mark Rydell, Joel Shoemaker, Tim Burton, of course, the legendary George Cukor, who directed you in Rich and Famous. Do you have a favorite director?
They were so wonderful. George, yes, you're right. George was a legend. And he was very special. And I was very lucky, very blessed that he took me in. I met him in New York and all the others that you mentioned.
Were they your favorites?
I liked Ridley very much.
Mark Rydell.
Mark Rydell, yes.
Joel Shoemaker.
Yes, Joel.
Now, I know I've heard you say in many interviews that your preferred medium as an actor is on the stage. So when I was looking at your Broadway career, you were in 4 shows: Gandhi, The Heiress, The Eccentricities of a Nightingale, and I Won't Dance. And none of those shows lasted very long. In fact, I think 2 of them opened and closed on the same day. That must have been terribly upsetting.
Yeah, it was, but it wasn't for those. But I did a lot of other shows in off-Broadway, off Broadway, you know, in the back of bars. We did shows. I don't know. I have no, regional theaters. My goodness, I was at different theaters in the country, Cleveland Playhouse. I was there for a good while. Did a lot of work there. Up in New England, in Maine, the Barter Theater. I was sitting down once with, can't come up with his name, a lovely actor. Anyway, he had been to the Barter Theater. So a lot of actors in those, went through the Barter Theater, which was in Abington, Virginia. All of those theaters around the country.
And the thing is that those performances are not captured on film. So
No.
you're going to be remembered mostly for your TV and your movie work because it lives on.
Yes. Shows, and that's why you can't, how do you replace a show like Dark Shadows?
No, but beyond all of that, you've written 10 books, including a number of novels. What would you say drives your creativity as a storyteller?
Oh, I don't know. I'm working on a couple of others right now.
Where do you get your inspiration from?
Life, my wife, our lives together. She was with me all the way.
And that's very unusual in show business to have.
The Barter. She was at the Barter with me, just working there. She wasn't an actress, but there.
It's very, very unusual for someone in show business to have had the prominence you've had, and particularly the popularity with the female gender, and still be married to the same woman all these years. It's quite remarkable, David.
It's quite fortunate for me.
For you both. So when you look back at your career, your body of work, have you had the career that you envisioned for yourself when you were starting out?
I don't know that I envisioned career of any sorts. I mean, the man who took me aside, Chuck Neal, said to me, as I mentioned, I think theater will be good for you.
Well, had you never thought of that before?
No, not seriously. No, not at all.
So what did you think you would do when you were in university, let's say after you got your master's degree?
Yeah.
While you were studying for your PhD, what did you think you would do for a living?
I don't know. Once I fell in theater very young. I was, still in college when I found theater. And that's how I met my wife. I was doing an outdoor drama in her hometown. In college, my first year, I was in business. But the straight out truth is I never, ever thought of doing anything else once I found theater. It was wonderful. I loved doing the plays. I loved going in. We had a poetry class. I loved going up on stage and reading poetry. God, Harvey, it was all so special to do those plays. I mean, one of my dearest friends was Tennessee Williams.
You knew him well?
Yes.
What a friendship to have.
But it was.
Wow. And did he influence you as a writer?
As a writer? Probably. I mean, but Tennessee was wonderful. We did shows together, So, and there were a few other writers that I met. I always remember the time I met Arthur Miller, just coming out of a building and going.
Did he know who you were?
No.
Did you get to talk to him?
Just briefly.
You really have had quite an amazing life. And I have to tell you, David, it's been such a pleasure meeting you and having this opportunity to reminisce with you about your amazing life and career. I want to thank you for all the joy you've brought to your millions of fans over the years. Thank you so much for all those great performances. And especially, thank you for taking the time to appear on our show.
It's my pleasure, and thank you for having me on your show.
It was a great honor.
I appreciate that.
Our guest has been the wonderful David Selby. For more information about Mr. Selby, his books, and everything that's happening, please visit his official website, davidselby.com. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time. Thank you to my producers, Steve Silver, my managers, Rick Marcelli and Robin Bragg Marcelli of the Marcelli Company in Hollywood, my director of programming, Robert Monaghan, my editor, Isaiah Sheralampidis, and my entire team at the XPTV1 network in the UK.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.